This is the best song. I know it seems really just wrong to be playing a holiday song, but I'm just trying to get us into the mood of end of year for this webinar. So if you're joining, please enjoy the most wonderful time of year. If you can add in the chat your name and organization and where you're coming in from today. It can be a geographic place or it could be an emotional place. You know, you could be coming from, excitement and Georgia at the same time. The same thing. Realize it seems wrong to be playing a holiday song when it's like 105 degrees in a lot of places. Seems wrong. Seems wrong to be having Halloween things out already, let alone year-end things. For people who are just joining, please put your name and org and where you're coming in from today. I can't actually see the chat, so I can't comment. But if anyone says anything, really, interesting your doing, I trust my subpanelists to really put up that. And if you love this song, don't worry, I'm going to play it twice because we want to let enough time for people to be joining the song so much. So coming in as we.
Hey, Julie. It looks like some of our folks can only respond to the hosts and panelists. Would we be able to change the settings here?
Also, something a participant can do. Participants change who you're sending it to. Could be sending it to everyone, not just to us. Everyone. Try and change it on our own. The exciting thing about playing this play is that you get to hear the really great beginning. Are you ready for the really great beginning? I'm going to play it again. Okay, here it comes. Oh, no, that's the wrong song. There. There it comes. See? This is how we feel about year end, right? I feel like I should stop it now and start the webinar with that build up. That feels like the right thing to do, doesn't it? All right. We have 101. We've reached over 100 participants. So that feels like a good moment to stop. So say goodbye to Kylie Minogue and the triple music we're playing. Once again, if you haven't already, please do feel free to put your name, where you're coming in from, and your org name in the chat, and use to everyone, not just to the hosts and panelists, so that we can share with everybody where folks are coming in from. And if you have any problems or anything like that, also put those in the chat so that we can deal with them. Hi, my name is Madeline Stanionis. I'm a partner here at M&R. And we're in the middle of a series of webinars that we called Back to School just because it was happening in September. I'm really excited about them. It's one of my favorite things about working at M&R is that we're pretty wild about sharing things that we learn with everybody, including you and our community out here. And we also learn them because of you. So we're always grateful to the community of organizations with whom we work and who share information, because that's how we're able to share things like this on our on this webinar. So I'm calling in from San Francisco, California, where it is not hot. It is actually really gorgeous. And as I said, I work at M&R. I use she, her pronouns, and I am joined by a really awesome group of panelists today. Ankur Asthana, Jonathan Benton, Carrie Lawless, Amanda Person, and behind the scenes, our colleague Julia Allenby is taking care of logistics. So if you have logistical issues or problems or concerns or questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. We'll keep an eye on those as well. One other thing that we do encourage questions. We're going to try and take the questions at the end just so we can get through the content. But we do use the question and answer feature at the bar at the bottom of your screen. You can press question and answer and ask her a question. Some questions we might answer as we go. Some questions we'll raise up at the end, but feel free to ask those as we go and we will get to them as best we can. And If you want to use emoji responses to things, please feel free to do that as well. Or if you want to chat in the chat with each other or comment and etc., please also use the chat for that. Questions, they'll go in the question and answer. That's the best way to make sure that we see them. All right. And again, if you haven't already, please put your name and org and where you're calling in from today. And without further ado, let's get started. Just first, if you don't know much about M&R, we work with only nonprofits, and this is our community, and this is our purpose, and it's our reason for being on this earth, is to work with nonprofits that are essential to the advancing the cause of justice and alleviating suffering and solving problems, all of the work that you do every day. And basically, we do whatever it takes to get there. So we do everything from campaign strategy, obviously digital fundraising and advocacy, digital advertising, all of the things you see there on your screen. Whatever a movement or a cause needs, we try to figure out a way to really make a meaningful difference with the work that we do. Yeah, and we've been doing it for 30 years. We only get to share information because we have great, amazing clients. This is sort of a list of some of our clients. I'm not showing that to brag, although it does seem a little braggy to show a list of really impressive logos, but mostly to say, I'm so grateful that we get to work with so many organizations who allow us to share. And that's the really important part of this, is that every day we are all learning from clients that we work with and from each other. And these are clients that allow us not only to the honor of working with them, but to also learn and share on things like today's webinar. I'm wild about a lot of things that M&R does, but I'm particularly excited about two things right now. One is Scout Quest. We're going to talk a little bit about Scout Quest in a little bit because we think it's a really important strategy for end of year. Scout Quest is our data co-op. It's a little bit different of a data co-op. It's a data co-op that really respects donor and supporter privacy. And Johnny's going to talk a bit more about Scout Quest in a little bit. And the other thing I'm really excited about is that we launched our campaigns arm earlier this year. It's called M&R Win, and we have a great team of folks who are really focused on what is going to happen in 2024 and how do we actually beat Trump and everything else all the way down the ticket. How do we actually do that and work with causes like yours to figure out how to do that in really meaningful and impactful ways. Both you can reach out to folks at either of the website addresses right there. So the reason you're all here is that end of year is a big deal for pretty much all of us. If we know anything from our annual benchmark study that we do each year, because it's annual, hence each year, is that December is a really important time for every nonprofit. It's where so much money that is raised, and it's that money that enables you to do the work that you do all year. And so it's really important for us to do as much as we can at year end to maximize what we can raise. And so for organizations like yours, I'm sure it's probably the most important time for fundraisers. And it's sort of like why all of us are obsessed with refreshing our computer screens on New Year's Eve and not simply focused on a ball drop or sparklers, which are cool too. But we all focus on what are we raising. And it's not just that we like to raise money and it's fun. It's because it really matters to the health of the organization in the year ahead. And that's why we do it. And that's why we pay a lot of attention. We're going to talk about not the basics today. So, there's lots of advice out there, certainly some of it from us on our blog about things you ought to be doing at end of year, how many emails to send, what are some of the tactics to use? Does a match work? That's not what this is. We're really talking about some strategies that we think a lot of organizations might not be doing yet. And there are three of them. One is making sure that the creative that you put in front of people at year end is the very best it can be, that's going to do the most to inspire those gifts. The second is ensuring that you're reaching the largest audience possible. And that means including folks who have maybe lapsed, but really still care about you, that sort of thing. And then the third is really figuring out who are some of the messengers that can best deliver your message. So you've got some good creative, you've got a bigger audience. Now figure out who are the messengers that can actually carry that message and really inspire not just gifts from your current audience, but new audiences. So those are the three strategies we're going to talk about today. And we're going to start with my colleague, Amanda Person.
Gotta unmute myself. Hi, thank you all. I'm Amanda Person. I use the she, her pronouns, and I'm located in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm an associate creative director at M&R with a background in digital fundraising for international relief nonprofits. But for the last 3 years, I have had the absolute pleasure of working with all kinds of nonprofits at M&R, from reproductive health and rights to environmental activism to animal rights and quite a few others. So in this time, I've also dug into the research projects that we're kind of always cooking up. So today I'll talk with you a bit about M&R's approach to testing and how you can apply some of those strategies during your end for your own audiences. Before we get started, I want to get a quick sense of your familiarity and comfort with research in general. So a poll should pop up asking, are you planning to do creative testing during your year-end campaign? Don't worry if you're like, I don't know, or like, no, definitely not, or like you're just not sure how to get started. That's okay. Well, that's what we're here for. We're here to talk through some of those things. So we'll just give it
everyone can see the poll, right?
conclude.
Everyone can see that, right? Okay, good. Little moment, a little peaceful moment before we really dig into the content. And we could probably show the results now, right?
Oh, looks like we've got
There
them.
it is.
All right. So it looks like we've got quite a few folks here who do this every year. That's so exciting. And some folks who are just not quite sure yet. And that is okay too. So that's what we'll talk you through today. So let's hop into it. Some of you who have joined M&R's webinars before may have seen this slide, but I think it's a really good place to start for anyone who is new to M&R's approach to research. So when it comes to research, we really believe that the monolithic approach to any audience just isn't sufficient from both an ethical and effectiveness perspective. Because people who share similar demographic profiles can have entirely different values, experiences, and perspectives on things. And so if we're really serious about developing like audience smart programs, strategies, and creatives, we have to evolve the way that we understand those audiences. And that means relying a lot less on assumptions and stereotypes and anecdata and more on what those audiences are telling us through their behavior and reliable data and their own words. So when we start talking about creative and messaging, we really need three things to be successful. We need the message to be rooted in your audience, not just who they are, but where they live, what headlines they're reading, what do they do in their free time, how are they feeling, and what are they hoping for. We also need it to be irresistible to that audience. The tightest turn of phrase is pretty meaningless if it doesn't actually connect with a person and motivate them to act. So through creative testing, we can identify the right ways to package your message so it's heard and remembered. And finally, it needs to be impactful. Once your message is out in the world, we rigorously track the effect it has on your audiences to make sure that your message is making the biggest impact possible. And now we love working on fun creative and surprising creative and fancy creative, but you notice that I didn't actually mention that when I was talking about successful creative, because that's not necessarily the goal. Our goal is effective creative. And many organizations make decisions about creative based on whether or not they like the creative design or copy, and that's just not effective. It's not the way we want to approach things. Effective creative really inspires a person to act or give or share or otherwise do something for a cause they care about. And that's really the only response that matters. Okay, so where do we start? A great campaign always starts with your audience. The ones you know, the ones that are emerging, and the ones you are aspiring to reach. And that's why we spend a lot of time identifying and understanding audiences, and it's just a critical part of the planning process. So we really use three primary sources of information. Behavioral data is the most important. What your people respond to, what they click on, comment on, donate to, reply to, etc. Usually that's going to require really diving into your performance data and probably your CRM. And then we look at demographics, which matter a lot, and we use them very carefully. We're interested in broad facts and not stereotyping our audience. And finally, we look at volunteered data. We use surveys, focus groups, polls, and other tools that ask folks what they think they can provide, like what their inspiration is behind this thing. And of course, we're going to test those theories because what they say is not always what they do. And especially when looking at volunteer data, we found that one-on-one conversations with supporters and prospects and the general public can yield valuable insights into how to leverage an organization's brand and mobilize people to donate or take action. Particularly tools like online surveys, like SurveyMonkey, or digital discussions, like the example that we have here, or virtual focus groups like Remesh or Zoom, and in-depth interviews can really help identify the exact audiences you should be speaking to and what matters most to them, as well as understanding the why behind their thoughts and behaviors. So step one tells us who our people are and gives us insight into what they need to hear. But in a crowded digital landscape, especially at end of year, with so many things competing for our audience's attention, it's really crucial that we understand how to present that message so that it's noticed, absorbed, and remembered. And too often, organizations don't know whether an email or an ad or a campaign concept will resonate with their supporters until they launch it, which, just wastes time, money, and goodwill on a concept that maybe doesn't do anything for that audience. So pre-market creative testing lets you get ahead by helping you understand how your creative performs before it goes live with very similar audiences to the ones that you want to talk to. So then you can just really focus your resources and efforts on creative that holds a higher likelihood for success. So on the right, here's an example of one of our pre-market tested creatives for Feeding America. The goal here was to help shift perceptions of SNAP among a sort of persuadable segment of conservative folks to soften the ground for positive SNAP policymaking. I won't go through the full case study because we did a deep dive into it during our last webinar. And if you're interested in learning more about that project, I'm happy to send you the recording of our last webinar, and we can really dig in there. You'll also notice that this creative that went through pre-market testing isn't flashy, and it really doesn't have to be in the pre-market testing phase. Remember, our goal is effective creative, and pre-market testing really allows us so much more flexibility and opportunity to iterate on the things that we're learning. And then later on in the process, we'll have a chance to really jazz it up and make it sparkle. So we've been talking about pre-market testing, but how do you actually run the test? It's like always a fun question. The not fun answer is that there are a ton of ways and there's really no cookie cutter approach to research. So the tools you choose will depend on what you've learned and what more you need to learn. So the logos here represent a ton of different tools that we use, but they change all the time. And you can see here that some are almost exclusively used for just understanding your audiences, like MRI Simmons for audience insight and Talkwalker for social listening. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have tools that are more oriented toward pre-market creative testing, such as Swayable and Grow Progress. In the middle, we have a bunch of survey platforms that work for pretty much either use case. And if you're a smaller organization thinking, okay, so how am I supposed to afford these tools? Some of them are actually shockingly affordable, particularly Grow Progress and Usability Hub. Of course, if you work with M&R, you're going to get the benefit of a ton of research experts who can develop a testing roadmap for you, help you understand your audiences, nail down your narratives, launch your test, and get everything in market. I also wanted to show just a little glimpse of the pre-market testing tool and results. Tools like Swayable on the right and Grow Progress let us test messaging, campaign concepts, names, logos, design, copy, all of that by measuring how different kinds of content influence participants' perceptions and future behaviors, all while comparing the results of that to an independent control group exposed to a sort of unrelated neutral content. Usually it's like an insurance ad. So basically this is like a medical trial with no unwanted side effects. This helps us identify which messages are most compelling for your audiences and which could cause a backlash effect. Again, without having to go live to learn this stuff in real time. We also have the ability to see how different audiences segments respond to each piece of content. On the left, we have a sample of Usability Hub, which allows us to conduct rapid prototype testing and get real-time data and feedback, often in like just an hour, to help us really evolve and refine ideas during the development process. So it definitely doesn't have to be like a fully fleshed out idea that's like perfect, but it does give us a gut check of like, okay, how should we be moving and what direction should we be moving in? This data can also be weighted across different demographic models and cross-tabbed with segments for the best insights for your audiences and to inform your future decisions. Okay, so you understand your audience, you've identified your narrative, you've selected the tools you're using, you've run your tests, and now you have your results. Huzzah. We finally made it, but we're not actually done yet. Now that we have our pre-market testing results, we use these quantitative and qualitative insights to sharpen our creative approach, ensuring that your creative, when launched, really engages and compels your target audiences. We couple the creative with a really rigorous in-market testing plan, which ensures your audience receives creative in a personal, authentic, and relatable way each and every time, generating more donations at lower costs. The post-launch measurement should include your performance data, obviously, but you could also include something like a brand lift study if you're interested in determining how your audience is reacting to your brand and market. And these kind of studies allow us to split audiences and survey them to understand which creative most successfully drives brand awareness and ad recall. This could be run on a variety of different platforms, including YouTube, Meta/Facebook, Lucid, and Pandora, just to name a few. I also wanted to show you another example of just how simple your pre-market creative can be and how we go through this process of sharpening creative based on results. Here are two pieces of creative that we developed for Planned Parenthood. On the left, we have the pre-market creative, which was tested in Swayable. This creative showed a 2.3 point lift in intent to donate and a 2.5 point lift in intent to take action on behalf of Planned Parenthood. With these results, we were able to develop a more visually appealing creative variant that actually went live in market and incorporated the core message from the previously tested frame. We're super pleased to see that this creative is performing really well among our target demographics and has been running since November 2022 and generated $24,000 in revenue. Finally, I just wanted to give you a timeline, and this isn't necessarily our timeline, but rather what it might look like for an organization to go through this full process. It takes a few weeks to move through that initial phase of combing through your performance and behavioral data and then incorporating some of the tools to gather qualitative data. This is really the most time-consuming part of it, but you have the benefit of time right now. You only need a week or so to develop the initial creative and work on those hypotheses, this like next step. And while we're on that subject of hypotheses, I will make a little aside just to make sure that those hypotheses include a few things, just making sure that it's clear and brief, making sure that it's based on previous learnings and data, and then seeking to learn something new about your audiences. And of course, it has to be testable. So some examples of hypotheses that we've used for some of our clients. So one is like donors who have previously given in emergency situations and have not become ongoing donors or sustainers will be more likely to respond to news-related urgent message frames. Another one, prospective donors will be more likely to respond to message frames that give specific details about how a person's donation could be used, i.e., if you give $30, we'll use that to supply a family with emergency housing or meals for a week. So after the ideation phase, we move into testing. And the timeframe here, like I said before, can really range from a few hours to a few days, depending on your audience sizes. And finally, you're ready to launch those beautiful, effective ideas and market. And if you start now, you're definitely going to be ready for end of year.
Amanda, that was amazing. It was also quick. So if you have questions, definitely put them in the Q&A. And one of my favorite parts that Amanda said, and I want to emphasize, is the hypothesis part, is that often, at least in organizations that we've worked with, we see people are like, our donors don't like this, or we will not reach young donors unless we do that. Those are great hypotheses. Instead of having endless discussions about younger donors don't like premiums and older donors like this, those are great questions, things to just put into a hypothesis and actually test with your pre-creative testing before you roll out with it, versus having those endless arguments and conversations, which are often, when it comes down to it, based on just a thing that you learned 15 years ago from a focus group once. And so really being able to incorporate that constant seeking, positing questions and hypotheses and seeking answers is just a really important part. And now's the time to do it, especially. So for example, if you have a question like, do matches really work? And what do you think? Put in a hypothesis and put it out there. So this is the time to do that, so you don't put a lot of your efforts in year end during that important time into things that actually end up not working really well. But also important is not just what the creative is, but the audience with what you reach people in. And that's where Johnny Benton and ScoutQuest come in.
Hello, I'm Johnny Benton. I'm a senior vice president here. I head up our analytics and optimization team, but I also work directly with a number of our clients running fundraising strategy, writing emails, sending them out, thinking about all kinds of fundraising stuff. So I am super excited about ScoutQuest, not just because it's an excited data project, but because it kind of actually has a real world impact on my clients and what they do. But first, another poll, as we are going into end of year, what stage of things are you all at in terms of your kind of thinking through email list growth strategies? I know a lot of my clients are trying to think about how can we kind of build our audience before we run some of our big email campaigns in Giving Tuesday and end of year. I will give it a second to answer. Hopefully this is like a pretty easy question to answer, so I won't give it too long.
Luckily, this is one of the things that most people have learned early on, is like, if you're going to get ready for year end, you better be adding lots of folks to your list. I feel like we should have timer music for this. I could play It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year again if you want.
Oh, please do not.
Right on.
Okay, let's see the answer. I bet we've got. Okay, here we. Oh wow, it's like pretty evenly split. People either don't have a budget, haven't thought about it, but there's a bunch of people who have a budget and are still trying to figure out what to do with it. So with that, I think here's one idea. Not to say it's the only place you could use to grow your list, but it is an exciting place that a lot of groups are just beginning to experiment with. So ScoutQuest, this is M&R's data co-op, and kind of we started this co-op kind of to address a challenge that a lot of our clients were having over a number of years, which was a growing concern over email deliverability and large inactive files. So people were suppressing people who hadn't clicked or opened on an email in long enough time. When we partnered organizations together, we were able to kind of share information back and forth between groups on who might be clicking on another group's emails, but not yours, and vice versa. So now we're using all that data together to really kind of share out powerful models on advertising and help people get information on who's donating and who's not. And the results have been really amazing. Right. So what makes Scout different from other co-ops is, co-ops aren't new in the direct mail world. It's long been kind of a setup where you join a co-op and you share your donors in, and it allows you to send mail to other people's donors and vice versa. And now there's kind of other online kind of versions of that setup. ScoutQuest isn't that. With ScoutQuest, nobody who participates in ScoutQuest is sharing their donor files to get emailed by some other group. The co-op is really about finding new information about the people that you have in your universes. And then using that for better or smarter targeting, and using that to kind of inform your own advertising strategies to then go out and find new people. But your people don't get given away to another group, other groups' emails, you're not getting in them. It's all about kind of an ethical way of kind of building our programs. So here's an example of what this looks like in practice. So I'm going to use an example from our client, League of Conservation Voters. So over many years, LCV was building a bigger and bigger email program. 5 years ago, let's say they had a email list of well over 1 million people. And then they hit a deliverability snag. They started to get sent to spam folders. They needed to kind of put really rigorous email suppressions in place to kind of get back in good standing with email providers like Gmail and Microsoft. And so over time, what that ended up look like is they used to be sending to kind of every email address that they were allowed to email. But then that audience began to shrink. So they started suppressing people who hadn't engaged recently. And over time, that inactive file grew and grew and grew. So I'm guessing this looks familiar to a lot of groups. I know this happened to a lot of our clients, and this is kind of why Scout Quest came to exist. But we kind of paused as we watched that file grow and asked ourselves, oh gosh, like there's got to be someone in this kind of big orange inactive file that we're showing here that would donate if just we knew who they were to ask. But we didn't feel safe emailing all of them because that would hurt our deliverability again. So with Scout Quest, with LCV, we worked together and we were able to find 666,000 people in their inactive file who were engaging with other organizations in some form. So this is, again, people in LCV's database, people that they had the right to email, but they weren't emailing because they hadn't opened or clicked on an email long enough. So this ended up being our kind of reactivation universe for them that we used, that we identified using our co-op. So what happened then? We took that 666,000 person file and we broke it into a really small random sample. It was just 1,000 people. We sent them an email first. We identified kind of one of their higher performing advocacy messages where we knew the click rate was going to be pretty good. We did that kind of really small sample send because we wanted to confirm, okay, we're going to email these people that we haven't sent in a long time. We want to make sure that they're actually like really going to engage in some way. This small sample gave us the confidence we needed to then move forward. So when early performance looked solid, we took that file and broke it up into smaller pieces, not 1,000 person chunks, but let's say like 60,000 person chunks. So not emailing the whole file all at once, but kind of smaller, manageable sizes. Then each day we would send an email to one of those chunks so that any given day we weren't hitting this huge kind of less active file. We were kind of going through it in a methodical fashion, trying to get people to click and open and engage again in some form. And then as people engaged with those emails, they kind of automatically got added back into the kind of overall active universe if they engaged or clicked or donated or took action. After that initial pass on things, we then did a second pass where we used Scout Quest data to kind of further drill in on the pockets of our audiences that would be particularly valuable. So maybe instead of people who are clicking for just one other organization, we looked at people who were engaging for multiple other organizations. Or we were looking for people who clicked on emails, but also donated for other groups. So basically the audiences that we think would really be worth a second pass to try to add back into their universe. And then we also broadened it so that we took Scout Quest data and we used it in other channels. So the primary use case that LCV was interested in was really growing their email list. But we then took that audience and expanded it to Facebook. So we identified people who were, maybe prospects and non-donors for LCV, but were donating to other groups and created models of those audiences and began reaching them on Facebook. And then 2 years later, the people that we identified for LCV that they hadn't been emailing at all had gone on to donate more than $200,000. So kind of we're raising this as something to think about before end of year as if you're looking at a big inactive file in your program, if you can reactivate as many of those people as possible, if you know that they're safe to email and you can get them back on the file before Giving Tuesday begins, that's really going to be the time period where you're going to have the most impact to kind of get that return on investment on any spend that you make. Then beyond that, what Scout Quest can be used for is, I kind of shared a couple ideas from LCV, but using this data it can be a really good advertising opportunity too. So a few examples here is if you're taking people who are on your file, but we've identified as donating to other groups, you can then run kind of advertising to them, fundraising advertising on Facebook. And that's a more qualified audience than someone who might be on your file, but hasn't donated to you, and you don't know if they donate to anybody at all. It's unclear if that's really going to be a good investment opportunity for you. But these specific people, they donate in some form, so it's a better opportunity. Other opportunities is kind of serving cultivation ads to folks who might be donating to other groups but aren't giving to you yet, to kind of build that trust and credential you with that donor over time. And then kind of over time, looking to identify people that maybe haven't engaged with you on email lately, but serving them ads on Facebook and seeing if or other advertising channels to see if you get them to engage in other channels, because maybe those aren't email people, but maybe they're still looking for ways that they might engage with you. In addition to all of this, what we can do with Scout Quest, we have a kind of an option in our co-op where we'll build lookalike audiences for you. So if you're unfamiliar with lookalike audiences, the general idea is you create a seed list, and that's kind of represented on the small square on the left. You then load it into an advertising platform. It creates an audience that is a much wider audience of people who share some similar characteristics to the seed list that you imported. Now, if you think about it, what we're kind of getting into with Scout Quest is not taking just your seed list, but kind of drilling into slightly different audiences. So instead of just taking your audience, what you can do is you can take your high dollar donors, let's say $500 plus donors, create a seed list of those, and then that will find a lookalike model that looks very different than kind of your general supporter profile. Taking that further with Scout Quest, what we basically can offer here is seed lists that are not built on your file, but are built on a larger donor universe from the co-op. So what we're seeing in the example here is a audience that is based on kind of donors to all wildlife type organizations. It's something that we can offer through the co-op, so that you can begin advertising to those groups. Now, if you start to layer on, we will also offer an audience for wildlife monthly donors that are a little different than normal wildlife donors, but there's a lot of overlap there. We can keep layering kind of different and expanded audiences. So here's kind of what it looks like when you layer in a higher value donors of kind of $500 plus donors. You're reaching a broader and broader audience as you layer in new models into your advertising platform. So what we're thinking about here is end of year is really a time period where you want to be trying to reach new people. It's going to be your best opportunity. If you're going to make kind of donor acquisition a big part of your strategy, Giving Tuesday end of year is a great time to be reaching audiences that you might not be thinking about already. Scout Quest gives you an opportunity that to find people that you can't reach just with your own donor data on the back end. Now, what we've been tinkering with on our end here is kind of trying to find the kind of overlaps of different lookalike models that truly reach as broad a new audience as possible. So here in this example, we're looking at an overlap of environmental high-value donors and wildlife high-value donors that have very little overlap. We can then layer in rights-based donors. So with these different models, we're really allowing clients to find truly, truly new audiences that they wouldn't be reaching otherwise. So how this works kind of process-wise, I'll go through this really quickly. We have our website, quest.mrss.com. There's a lot of background information on that website, includes pricing information, kind of the data files that you need, all that kind of stuff. So I encourage you to go there if this sounds at all interesting. We are encouraging groups, if they do want to participate or are considering participating, the first step is to sign a participation agreement. Or the first step after you tell us that you're interested is to sign a participation agreement. We're asking groups to try to do that by mid-September in order to set yourselves up on kind of the right timeline to get your data back in before end of year. After you sign that agreement, we ask you to submit a bunch of data to the co-op. That includes things like your email list, 5 years of donation data, email clicker data, information like that. We then take that data, match it against what we have in the co-op and give you a summary of kind of what your file looks like compared to the rest of the co-op. You then take that summary, decide what data you want back from us. We then deliver it back to you, ideally by mid-November, and you are in a position to take it from there and start your reactivation campaigns before end of year and run your best end of year fundraising campaign ever.
Best end of year fundraising campaign ever. I love that. I mean, we need it this year, y'all. Like, it's been a hard year for a lot of organizations. So whatever you can do to do that it really makes a difference. And whether or not you use something like ScoutQuest or you use any other kind of way to just build that audience, that is the most important thing you could be doing right at this very moment, is making sure you have the widest audience possible. One of the things that helps us get a wider audience is using different messengers and voices. And that's why I'm really super excited about influencer work, which I used to think influencers were just people that talked about makeup and how my house wasn't nearly as pretty as it was supposed to be, according to Instagram. But the influencer work that we've been doing has really turned my notions on its head. And I imagine it will turn your notions on their head too. And I think Ankur Asthana, my colleague here at M&R, is gonna bring y'all into the world if you haven't started using influencers yet.
Awesome. Thanks, Madeline. Yeah, so hey, everyone. My name is Ankur Asthana. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a vice president in our digital organizing and social media practice area at M&R. And I also help anchor a lot of our influencer services, which we've been developing over the last 2 years. And when we talk about influencers at M&R, we're really talking about content creators on platforms like TikTok and Instagram who can speak authentically about their issues. So yeah, we want to kick things off with a quick poll. And really just the question is just, have you thought about using influencers for fundraising or advocacy? I know some folks maybe, I'm sure everyone has seen influencers use, whether it's in your personal lives or through your organizations already, but we're really excited about the opportunity there is for causes to be able to, and organizations to be able to use influencers, especially in a world where people spend more of their social and cultural lives on these platforms. We really think that influencers are a key piece of this. So I think we can go ahead and close out the poll if folks have had a chance to answer that. All right, cool. So it looks like a majority of people are either interested in and trying to figure it out or are already doing it, which is awesome. And there's a few folks that are maybe wondering what exactly is influencer work look like, or what does the budget need around that. But that's awesome to see. So part of the reason why we believe in working with influencers, and we can hop to the next slide, Madeline, is that we know that the messenger often matters just as much as the message that you're delivering. And corporate brands know this. They know that audiences trust what influencers say about their brands, often more than what brands say about themselves. And we believe the same is true for issues and causes. So over the last 2 years, we've worked with hundreds of influencers on a range of issues to drive narratives, to engage audiences, and raise funds. And what we found is that even though influencers can be effective messengers on their own, their reach is pretty limited for a couple of reasons. It's limited by platform algorithms. It's limited by factors outside of their control in terms of which audiences are following them in particular. And even for influencers that have maybe millions of followers, it's not likely that your message won't reach all of them, certainly, or even that their follower audience is definitely the right one for your organization. And so that's where we've really tried to think about how do we get creative in making sure that this effective content is reaching the right folks. And what we've seen drive the most impact is pairing influencer content with digital advertising efforts. That combination of influencer content amplified by paid ads to reach the right audiences, to drive donations, drive action, is really where we've seen some of the strongest results. And one of the great things about this kind of approach is that the kinds of influencers that you get to work with aren't just limited to folks who have those huge followings. This approach allows you to work with influencers that have a real personal connection to the issues that they're speaking about. So we've worked with influencers who are working for minimum wage to rally for economic justice. We've worked with people with lived experiences of abortion who have spoken out and raised money and rallied support for repro rights. And we've worked with union teachers to push back against anti-LGBTQ legislation in the classroom. And these creators don't always have massive followings, but all of them are able to tell really authentic, powerful stories, whether it is about economic justice, about reproductive rights, about the legislation this harmful legislation that they're facing, and connect to the issues that they are talking about. So there's two quick fundraising examples that we wanted to highlight that really showcase this approach and we think are instructive as you think about end of year. The first is our work with International Rescue Committee during their end of year fundraising efforts last year. And if you had joined our webinar on influencers earlier this year, you might be familiar with this example, but I think it's worth going over again because it really is an amazing case study of what's possible when you layer influencers into your end of year program, as IRC did. And just for a little bit of context, historically for IRC, what had performed well on ads were things like celebrity ads, things like urgent crisis videos. And so when we were working with them last year, we were looking for a new approach that could keep the creative fresh and also see if we could improve fundraising performance. And so we did outreach to a number of TikTok influencers that had a personal connection to refugee families or supported refugees in some way. And we asked them to do two things. So the first was we asked them to post content on their own channels. But then more importantly, we asked if we could use their content on other channels for advertising. And we reached out to about 20 influencers. We ended up contracting with 7 of them. And the results were pretty incredible. So the influencer content that we used outperformed the traditional ads creative, even some of the strongest performing ads creative that IRC typically used on both Facebook and YouTube. And this included many of the top performing A-list celebrity videos and urgent crisis videos that they had. So these were folks just oftentimes, with maybe 50,000 or 100,000 followers who were really creating compelling content that performed well and resonated with audiences. And on these platforms, influencer content had one of the lowest cost per donation during the end of year campaign. And in the last 10 days of the campaign, influencer content raised nearly $230,000. And it formed the basis of an ongoing effort that has continued to raise funds for IRC in 2023. So this was kind of an initial pilot, but based on the success of that and based on the relationships that were built with creators, IRC was able to continue fundraising into this year and see a lot of success. So more recently this year, we partnered with Human Rights Campaign during June for Pride Month. And we worked with a set of 6 influencers from the LGBTQ community to discuss the urgency of donating, particularly as anti-LGBTQ legislation is taking hold around the country. And so the focus was really on storytelling from folks who are directly impacted. And we worked with a diverse set of creators representing many facets of the queer community. And one of the best performing pieces of content was a woman from Florida, it's the example on the right, who was forced to leave her home state due to anti-trans legislation. And so folks were really speaking authentically about how they were directly impacted. And this content was run both for lead generation as well as fundraising ads. And what we saw is that the influencer ads content drove engagement that outperformed benchmarks significantly. So we have kind of broader benchmarks that we look at for social engagement, and we saw a significantly higher engagement rate on the influencer content. And we also saw that when this content was used as part of ads, these were some of the top performing paid ads for lead gen and fundraising. So again, another example where we were able to bring together this really powerful creator content that influencers were making, pair it with digital ads, and see great results. So I'm going to pass it to Carrie now, who's going to talk a little bit about the advocacy and narrative building side of working with influencers and how it can really help build up your program heading into end of year.
Thanks, Ankur. Hi, everyone. My name is Carrie Lawless. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a senior account executive in our digital organizing and social media practice area. So why are we talking about advocacy and narrative shifts before end of year fundraising? It's because advocacy efforts, as I'm sure you all know, are an important part of building that fundraising audience. And the influencers that Ankur and I are talking about are experts at building an engaged audience. They're talking about things that they care about, and we know that we can turn advocates into donors. So we help influencers run campaigns that help build momentum by amplifying narratives that they care about and that their audience cares about. both organically and with a paid strategy. And like Ankur was mentioning, with our fundraising efforts, we always recommend combining an organic influencer strategy with a paid strategy for fundraising and advocacy. Efforts that we've done in the past include driving petition signatures and getting supporters fired up to take an action, such as launching strong calls to action with our creators during rapid response moments to support SMS list building and engage more of their audience and turn them into activists. One of the benefits of building a deeper relationship with influencers is their audience, and we can work effectively with our influencers when we need them the most by building that strong relationship. So, for example, if there's breaking news and we need their audience and their supporters to act right now, we can work quickly with that influencer to launch content and mobilize their audience, which is turning into our target audience. And that can be building awareness, taking action, signing up to volunteer, or making a donation. So here's one of our case studies where we built relationships that have yielded really great results. So our data has shown that the more aligned a piece of data is with the creator's regular content, the more successfully it breaks through the algorithm rather than using an overly scripted or overly produced piece of content. So with our partnership with the National Education Union, we've worked with over 90 member influencers. And in that process, we've developed a member influencer cohort of 3 members to produce content. So we worked together with the influencer to ensure that we're maintaining their authentic voice while ensuring that the organizational message was being heard. Because of that, the cohort was able to speak to the mission of the organization without a lot of creative oversight from us as an agency or the organization, which allowed the engagement rate to stay steady along, like in comparison with their other content. So the cohort was able to then pitch concepts and videos to us and the organization based on the trends that they were seeing on their assets rather than us making an assessment. This content did perform really well, and we're testing further to see if less structured content, as well as various lengths of content, continues to perform well compared to a very stringently produced piece of content. This is Flint here on the screenshot, and what they did through our relationship was when the SCOTUS decision came down against 303 LLC Creative, they were able to produce a piece of content within 2 hours rather than over a week that we've had to go through a creative process beforehand. And Flint in particular has made over 15 pieces of content for our client, with several of their concepts going viral with millions of total engagements. And since we partner with Flint frequently, they pitched us on this queer educator survival kit in response to a lot of the anti-LGBTQ legislation coming out of places like Florida. And they were able to do that because they saw that giveaways were trending in a big way with their audience, educators, queer folks, and the like. So this concept was completely driven by Flint with little creative direction from us and garnered over 20,000 engagements in less than 24 hours. So like any organizing, building a relationship with the creator means that you're building a relationship with a strong narrator with a very loyal audience. And we believe that that relationship, like in all traditional organizing, can lead to donors, advocates, and action takers to be engaging with your organization that would otherwise have been left on the table.
Awesome. So yeah, and we've been getting a couple of questions just about the process and how this all looks. And I can give a quick overview now, and then definitely we'll share our contact information to be able to dive into more detail if you're interested. But as a top line, the way we approach working with influencers at M&R is really kind of an A to Z process. We start with a social listening scan, which is something we've started to implement more recently. And then that informs a creative brief, which really is kind of the go-to document for both us and the creators, the influencers, to really look back to and refer back to as the kind of the guiding document for creating content. We also then do the in-depth research and vetting of potential influencers to make sure that any past content that they've posted aligns with, the values of your organization. And then after vetting, there's kind of a pretty involved process of contracting, payments, relationship management. One note that might be useful to some folks is we found PayPal is really the way a lot of creators prefer to be paid. Not in all cases, but in many cases, that's what we found to be more effective and efficient. And then we, work with influencers to develop and publish their videos, and then translate that content to also be used for launching digital ads. And of course, all this feeds into making sure that we're evaluating and tracking the results to see the performance compared to existing content. So, as we kind of close out, we really want to emphasize that working with influencers can be a relatively easy add-on to your end of year fundraising strategy. And I think one of the things that folks are thinking about budget and all of that is that really these programs are pretty scalable in size and duration and budget. We've seen organizations do kind of one-off short pilots to long-term ongoing campaigns, and both have been successful. One kind of note is we do typically recommend working with at least 5 to 10 influencers for a given campaign, just to have enough pieces of content to really find the one or two that really take off and make that initial investment worth it. And the other thing we'll note is these influencers don't just need to be TikTok influencers, even though that's where I think a lot of us think when we think of influencers. They can be on Twitch, YouTube. There's really a wide range of who you work with. So if this is something that you think you might be interested in for end of year, we're definitely excited to potentially support on it. We do ask that you please let us know by September 15th at the latest, just because we do have a lot of organizations that are interested, and also there's typically a 6 to 8 week kind of timeline that we've found that it takes to make sure that we're doing the proper outreach, getting contracts signed, and getting content developed. So with that, I'll toss it to Madeline to close this out.
I feel like we just started the season of so many deadlines that it's all deadlines. It's all deadlines from now to the end of the year, y'all. We're all used to it, but it's all deadlines. We have room for a couple questions, and I see there's a couple questions in the Q&A. All right. So I see that do you have case studies on donors who join a file or a nonprofit through an influencer that shows they stick? I'm concerned with the long-term value of these type of acquired donors. Ankur, do you want to answer that live?
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't currently, in part because this is relatively new for a lot of organizations. And so anecdotally, we've seen some good crossover with folks who've come in through influencer campaigns and their engagement and action and advocacy and other pieces of kind of the work that organizations are doing. There are some other kind of data pieces out there that we've heard from other organizations that we haven't worked with that have seen similar results. But I would say it's still new enough where we think these are valuable donors. In some one thing to keep in mind is that, again, these are donors that would see your advertising or your content anyways. And really what we're doing is we're presenting a different type of content. So it's not necessarily reaching a new audience that you might not have reached. It's really presenting them with new content. So hopefully that helps answer it a bit.
Yeah, we're definitely going for warm prospects there. And it's, it's like a lot of many organizations say, we want to find younger and more diverse donors. This is a place to do it. This is where we're all learning about what does it take to actually keep folks. I did want to say the deck and recording, the recording of the webinar will be distributed. We don't distribute our decks, but the recording has the deck in it. So you're welcome to, watch it on a Friday night if that's how you spend your Friday nights. So I think that we've gotten to the questions that were submitted. One question about money, which is always going to be great to know what was spent, the level of I wonder this is for influencers, Ankur and Carrie, if you can give a sense of what's the range of money you spend on an influencer? There is a range, I'm sure, of how to do it, but go ahead.
Yeah, there's two pieces. And I think the first part, which I think we had answered was just kind of the range of how much you're paying per post or per influencer kind of video. And we have a tiered system based on number of followers for equity purposes, but in general, kind of the $1,500 to $3,000 per post is what you can budget. Obviously, in addition to that, there's the ads budget, there's, you know, any of the time that you spend to work with influencers and all of that, but that's kind of top line. I mean, happy to discuss more with folks who are interested in thinking about what a pilot budget might look like.
We have 1 minute left. Is there any one question that anyone wanted to add? Okay, somebody added a question. Will offering non-cash compensation for influencers burn bridges for us? I've seen a few influencers post about getting tired of swag being offered instead of payment. Also, I don't know how to say this, but most nonprofit swag is not awesome, but some of it's okay. But go ahead, Carrie and Ankur.
Yeah, the quick thought here is from an equity perspective, we really do encourage payment, cash compensation of some kind. There are situations where certain organizations, for example, you know, animal rights organizations that are able to provide experiences that can work for influencers and kind of help build their brand as well. But in general, our position is to pay influencers, in part because we've also found that long-term that develops strong relationships. And in some ways, it's pretty cost effective when you think about the time that you might spend developing out that creative anyways. You're getting someone who really knows how to speak compellingly to audiences to develop this really great content.
And with that, we're going to close out. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've got more coming up. The deck also shows that we have their addresses and email addresses. So if you want to email them, feel free. And me too, I guess, but I'm mostly, you know, propping you guys up. All right. Thank you so much. We hope to see you at our next webinars, and please reach out if you have any questions at all. Have a great day.